And no, I'm not the next comedian. I'm the co-director of the Campaign for America's Future. Let's give a big round of applause to those people who have been serving us lunch and breakfast and dinner, the hotel and restaurant employees, Local 25. So good afternoon. As co-director of the Campaign for America's Future, I can tell you that we are incredibly proud of the role that we played along with others in bringing together labor union members and environmentalists and community and civil rights leaders and business people around the powerful and simple proposition that is the heart of the Apollo Alliance. The investment necessary to retool America for energy independence and stop global warming can, if we do it right, create the next generation of good jobs right here in America. We called it the Apollo Alliance because we wanted to conjure up the sense of urgency and the important timetable that Jack Kennedy set when he said we will go to the moon in a decade. And we're happy to say that after intense organizing at the grassroots and city and state and national level, 2 of the 3 remaining candidates for president have embraced the Apollo vision and are developing clear timetables for energy independence and green jobs. And we'll work on that other one, that third one. We're proud that the Apollo Alliance now has a dynamic new leader, the new chair of the Apollo board, Phil Angelides. Phil has a track record of political success as chairman of the California Democratic Party, turning that state that used to send America politicians like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and Pete Wilson into a state that is solidly blue, except maybe for the governor, who is neither red nor blue nor sort of another color altogether. As the treasurer of California, Phil presided over the finances of what would be the 8th largest country in the world. And through creative but prudent green wave investing by CalPERS public pension funds, he created a model for the kind of public investing we'd like to see the federal government do in clean energy, cutting-edge technologies, and environmentally responsible companies. He is the perfect leader for the Apollo Alliance and the perfect person to lead this lunch discussion of green jobs. Please welcome Phil Angelides.
Thank you so much, Roger, and it's great to be here in a room full of progressives and liberals proudly fighting to take back this country. Great to be with each and every one of you. And it's wonderful to be here on this panel. We've got some great speakers, Majora Carter, Joel Rogers, and today we are going to talk about really the compelling issue of our era, how we preserve our planet in the course of doing so, how we build an economy of sustained strength, and how we create a wave of good-paying jobs for America's future. I am proudly here today in my new role as chairman of the Apollo Alliance. And at the Apollo Alliance, we are building a national coalition of environmental, business, labor, and community leaders who are all committed to the notion that we are going to build a clean energy economy. And in the course of doing it, we're going to restore the American notion that we will create wealth for generations to come, wealth that is broadly shared. We believe we can do this if we made the same kind of commitment this country has historically made over its past, to use its talent and its enormous wealth and capital to power a new set of opportunities for generations to come. It's what John Kennedy did in 1961 when he committed to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade of the 60s. We succeeded in reaching that goal, but as importantly, John Kennedy mobilized engineers and scientists and innovators and the workers of America to reach our goal and to set high expectations for this country. Now, no one in this room should undersize the immediacy of the threats and challenges in front of us. We're tragically dependent on foreign oil, putting our nation's security at risk and sending thousands of young men and women to die in the sands of Iraq. We're facing the loss in our own communities of good-paying jobs, depleting the middle class that's been the backbone of our fabric. We're seeing the loss of our competitive edge to other countries as they retool their economies for the green era ahead. And we're facing immediate threats with oil reaching over $100 a barrel as our economy careens towards recession. It's clear that we have to address these challenges, but no one should underestimate what's in front of us, what it will mean to change to a clean energy economy. Think for a moment about what coal and steam meant for the 19th century. Think about what the 20th century would have been like without the internal combustion engine and without electricity. Responding to the threat of oil dependency will create the same kind of opportunities and challenges for our generation. Now, some see in all this great disruption and dislocation the oil companies, the custodians of the last century's economy. Yet others see what John Gardner, the founder of Common Cause, described as, quote, a series of great opportunities disguised as insoluble problems. Perhaps Thomas Friedman has written about this most eloquently in last year's April 17th edition of the New York Times Magazine. He laid out eloquently the challenge in front of us. He talked about it, what it will mean for this country to transform to a green economy. Here's what he said. It's about creating a cornucopia of abundance for the next generation by investing in a whole new industry. It's about getting our best brains out of hedge funds and into innovations that will not only give us clean power industrial assets to preserve our American dream, but also give us the technology that billions of others need to realize their own dreams without destroying the planet. It's about making America safer by breaking the addiction to a fuel that is powering regimes that are deeply hostile to our values. And it's about making America the global environmental leader instead of the laggard. That's our dream at the Apollo Alliance. Now, as a country, we faced enormous challenges before that in some ways may dwarf what's in front of us. Think for a moment about America in the midst of the Civil War. 600,000 men and women dying on the battlefield and of disease. But it's that moment that President Lincoln decides to start the Transcontinental Railroad to cement a national economy, to pass the Homestead Act that made millions of Americans equity owners in our society for the first time, and to pass the Land Grant Act that created colleges that trained the workforce of the Industrial Revolution. Think about the Great Depression, fascism on the march, 1/4 of Americans out of work. It's that moment that Franklin Roosevelt decides to mobilize the capital, the public capital of America, to launch the New Deal and the greatest era of prosperity in any country in the world's history. Think about the 50s and 60s when many of us grew up as baby boomers. It's at that moment in the midst of the Cold War that Republican and Democratic presidents alike passed the Interstate Highway Act, the National Defense Education Act, launched the Apollo Project to empower our people and power our economy and create good jobs for America's working families to make us the strongest economy on earth. Today, we need to take the best of our past and make it our vision for the future. We need to step up to the challenge of global warming and the need to secure our economic future. The good news is change is afoot in the private sector and in the public realm, in communities and states across this country. Good things are happening. Look at the private world for a minute. GE has announced that it wants to double its revenues from $10 billion to $20 billion from clean technologies by 2010. Cisco, a world leader in networking systems, is making a big bet on developing the next generation of smart buildings. Boeing, a proud company with a union workforce, has leapt to the front in airline production because they made the decision to go to planes that were 20% more fuel efficient, and the 787s had the fastest order takeoff of any plane in history. Capital markets are in transition. In 2006, 3 of the 5 biggest IPOs were in solar voltaics. Hey, and here's a whopper for you. Rupert Murdoch says he's going to make the Fox News channel carbon neutral. That means Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly, they're finished. They're gone. And we're seeing change in communities across this country. Pennsylvania is creating thousands of good-paying union jobs in renewable energy. Once again, making the industrial heartland a leader. Cities like Salt Lake and Denver have committed to new investments in public transit, making those communities more sustainable and developing tens of thousands of new jobs. Chicago is propelling itself to the front ranks of the global economy with a whole array of green initiatives. But I'm here today to say that we have to step it up. That 2009 can be our 1933, it can be our 1961 if we organize and if we build a movement that will invest in the future of this country and create a wave of green jobs. Al Gore has it right. He has said the outer boundary of what is considered politically possible in fighting global warming today falls far short of what is minimally necessary to meet the challenges ahead of us. So at the Apollo Alliance, and I urge each of you to think in the same way, we're thinking big, not nibbling at the edges. We're thinking about a transformation as dramatic as steam and coal in the 19th century, as electricity in the 20th century. We believe this nation must fuse high environmental expectations with a powerful set of investments in our communities, in our industries, and on our people to secure our future. Look, our opportunities are boundless. Buildings in this country, the built environment, consume 70% of our nation's electricity, produce 40% of our carbon emissions. Each year, 3% of the buildings in this country are either new or substantially rehabilitated. By 2030, 75% of our built environment will turn over. 325 billion square feet of new and renovated buildings. If we commit ourselves to a new Apollo project, we can renovate America's buildings, we can fight global warming, and we can create millions of jobs. As gas soars to $4 a gallon, yes, George Bush, as families spend on average close to $5,000 a year just for gasoline. The fact is that we have a crying need for public transit, inner-city and intra-city transit systems. A $200 billion investment in public transit will put 1.4 million Americans to work. For 1 year in Iraq, we can create millions of good-paying jobs here in America and fight global warming and secure our economic future. If we invest in biofuels and renewable energy and new technologies, we can spur new wealth broadly shared and put America in the position of being the global purveyor of the new green revolution. By 2030, if we do this right, 40 million Americans, 1 in 4 of our people, can be working in green-collar jobs. If we commit ourselves to a new Apollo project, we can fight global warming and we can create good jobs for our people. And the fact is that now's the time. In 2009, we will have a new president of the United States of America. The Bush-Cheney era is over and our era will begin. So let me close with this thought. This won't be easy, but think of what Lincoln faced. Think of what Roosevelt faced in the midst of the 1930s with fascism on the march and a depression in hand. And I want to recall what President Kennedy said when he announced our decision to go to the moon. He said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. We choose to go to the moon because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills." Now, President Kennedy picked a challenge, and he backed it with bold action. He invested $3.5 billion a year out of a $600 billion a year economy. The equivalent today in our $13 trillion economy would be $70 billion a year in new investments in renewable energy and clean technology and training our workers to be competitive in the global environment. We can do it. We must do it. And if our parents' generation could spend such a great share of their wealth exploring the heavens, certainly we can do it to save our environment and secure our economic future. That's what we're doing at the Apollo Alliance. Go to apolloalliance.org. Join this fight. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce Majora Carter. Majora is a wonder. Maybe many of you know her already. But she was born and raised and continues to live and work in South Bronx. She travels the world, and she travels her community each and every day, putting together the resources to improve the quality of life and economic opportunities in a community that has too often been left behind in the wake of economic progress. She's done incredible things. She's created riverfront parks and green roofs, dramatically increased the number of trees in South Bronx. She's put together green-collar job training programs. She is a whirlwind. She is a model at the local level of how this economy is going to transform to a green economy. Please welcome Majora Carter.
Did I hear some South Bronx in the house? Woo! You South Bronx! Okay. Now I'll start. I gotta tell you, it's always really fun to be in places like this because it really has reminded me of how far I've come, and I think of how far this country is going to go. Because I'm from a place where urban blight was considered just the norm. Next slide. And I moved back home after college to a place where Giuliani had decided that even though we handled an enormous amount of the city's waste and other kinds of infrastructure, that he still felt that we deserved to carry even more. He was planning on building another waste facility that would have brought about 40% of the city's municipal waste to our waterfront. So I became really familiar with something called environmental justice. And what environmental justice means is that no community should have to bear the brunt of lots of environmental burdens and not enjoy any environmental benefits. And that may seem like just normal, what we should all expect. But right now, as it has always been, race and class will be the first and the last thing to tell you where you will find the good stuff like parks and trees, and the bad stuff like what you see here, all pictures taken from my neighborhood. You know, you show other pictures in other parts of the country, you might see mega hog farms, or you might see big beautiful mountaintops with the tops cut off, they're being dug out for coal. And it's not just that these things are bad things to live next to, they also have serious health impacts as well. The South Bronx has one of the highest asthma rates. 1 out of 4 of our kids has it. We also suffer a really incredible obesity epidemic. Yes, part of it is to do with the fact that we have a food desert in our community. The other part is that parents often aren't really keen on letting their kids go outside when they feel that they're going to be hit by a truck. So, next up, we also now have conclusive proof that proximity to fossil fuel emissions causes learning disabilities in young children. And I think we all know now that poor kids from poor communities have a better chance of going into jail rather than onto higher education or onto a really good job. So in doing this work, I gotta tell you, all I really wanted to do was, and my community wanted to do, was just like get a little breath of fresh air. We really just wanted some relief. And so as we were fighting against Giuliani and our governor, Pataki at the time, against this huge waste facility, I almost didn't even notice the fact that we kept getting these notices about building beautiful waterfront parks on our waterfront and doing Bronx River Restoration Project. But fortunately, I had a big old dog who took me jogging one day and took me through the places that my parents wouldn't even let me go when I was a kid. What I thought was an old, abandoned, gross dump on our waterfront. Turned out that it was an old, disgusting dump, but that ended at the Bronx River. And if you didn't look behind you at the hypodermic needles and all that, and the weeds and garbage piled over your head, and just looked at the river, you saw all the possibilities in the world. went back and wrote that little tiny seed grant proposal, and over the course of many, many years, or actually not that many, it didn't take that long, many cleanups and lots of community support, as well as support from lots of other folks, businesses and government, we were able to turn that into a $3 million park. In the short year that it's been, a year and a half that it's actually been like this in the community, it's become a real staple, and I love it so much I actually got married there back in 2006. To the coolest guy ever. What? Oh, right across the river. All right. There you go. Oh, I just love this. My people in the house and whatnot. All right. So anyway, so we were just working to do these. Honestly, we were just happy to do this kind of work, but as we loved and worked on the Bronx River, we just knew that we just kept watching the work happening and realized that it just kept bringing other folks in to do that kind of work. And we were like, well, we can do some of this environmental restoration work. We just need the skills to do it. So we set about actually doing a job training program. Next slide, babe. And because we figured if we, not only was it going to have the environmental costs associated with it, but listen, wouldn't it also be great if it also helped do some economic development as well as like deal with some of our social burdens as well? Because the environmental services that we chose that we really wanted to work on were things like stormwater management, that actually collects the stormwater that we all know are becoming huge burdens on our systems right now. Also, air quality improvements. Green things clean the air and produce oxygen. Urban heat island mitigation. The next slide up is a slide that shows that in areas where you have more green space, it's cooler. Okay, global warming, we can help deal with it if we do some natural work here. And next up is the kind of thing that you don't even want to put a price tag on because it is so priceless. The environmental health and well-being, of our mental and our spiritual souls. I mean, people think of parks and greenways and bikeways as like little amenities, but they're not. They're real strategic pieces of infrastructure in our communities that actually, in terms of all the environmental services, pay dividends in terms of the economic costs associated with it, and benefits, as well as the social and also the human benefits as well. So what we did was we started a program called BEST, which stands for Bronx Environmental Stewardship Training Program. It's a job training program where we taught folks in the arts of urban forestry, green roof installation, brownfield remediation, giving folks those trainings so that they could actually not only feel as though they had a financial, or rather a personal stake in making the environment better, but also a financial one. And I got to tell you, if you've seen what happens with a woman who's never had a job, who's been on welfare most of her entire life, and then all of a sudden she has this job and she knows that she's not only providing for her family, but is also making the world a better place, that is power. And that's what this program does. And this are the stats to show it. I'm especially pleased about the 10% in college, too. So next up. We were also really fortunate to be able to hire a couple of the folks that went through our job training program to be greenway stewards. Because again, we got about $20 million from the city to actually do some greenway related work, which was a first. And but what this guy's doing, it looks like he's just pruning a tree. But actually what he's doing, because he understands what that tree is, he understands where it is in the location of the neighborhood, folks on that block were like, look, there's a lot of illegal activity happening underneath this tree because it's really dark. So next slide. So what he did was prune that tree so that the street light from across the street could actually shine in on it. That's called crime prevention through environmental design. Next up. And another thing they did, again, took surveys of what's going on in the community. Lots of senior citizens actually suffer from a sense of social isolation. They built these tree guards underneath this other kind of tree so that folks could come out of the senior citizen center that it's in front of and just enjoy the daylight. Again, another kind of crime prevention techniques, eyes on the street. Next up. We got no money to do, work along the river, to get people down to the parks to market them. So we had to do it ourselves. So we painted a green line. to show people where the parks actually were. And little kids actually make up games about it. It's really quite cute. Anyway, next up. Oh, and we also did an anti-poop campaign where people were they were actually requesting this stuff in front of their homes. It was awesome. Next up. We also we've totally imported lots of great stuff from other parts of the world. Green roofs is something that is near and dear to my heart. We started a green roof installation program called Spartan Roofs, and what you're seeing here is the installation of a green roof, which is just living materials on a roof in a structured soil medium. And keep going. And what you have here is that, number one, they actually retain stormwater, about 75% of it that falls on it, so that's not being funneled through really costly end-of-pipe solutions. Next up. And it also cleans, they have their green surface area, so it cleans the air. Next. And you also provide living wage jobs. These are the kind of things that cannot be outsourced anywhere. Next. Oh, this is my upstairs neighbor, who's actually the son of one of our best graduates. And this is the roof that we did about 2 years ago on the roof of my office. Okay. And again, what it does, keep going, and what it does is actually reduce the need, not completely obliterate the need for things like sewage treatment plants, but it actually makes good use of it. And again, those are jobs, those things, those environmental services pay us back tenfold. And next up. So, next. And wouldn't it be kind of cool if sooner rather than later, that kind of low-impact development, green was the kind of things that we saw all over the place, and the fact that like even birds would like have a really nice time flying south for the winter. They'd even get confused. So next up, this is a little quiz that I give to folks, and most people frankly get the answer wrong. But anyway, I'll just throw it out to you. USA, 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's... No. Go ahead. Answer is, thank you. Yeah, land of the free. So remember this, next up, remember this little kid. Cute thing, I love this little boy. And, but remember how we know that now proximity to fossil fuels emissions actually causes learning disabilities in young kids. Next up, making him a better candidate for something like this. Now, next. Now, we know also that, you know, we know the effect of, say, like things like the global economy, rather the fact that so many of our jobs are being pushed offshore right now, being outsourced, and that we know now that, you know, we know that the fact that China is building 2 coal-fired power plants each and every week to support our hyperconsumption. We know that it has an effect on the global environment, but do we think about the effect that it has on the guy on the block? Okay, so we have a pollution-based economy that punishes those that produce the least, that produce that pollution the least. And we also have a prison-based economy that none of us are really proud to have. So next up, one of the things that we're working on right now is how do we deal with that, knowing what the reality of it is. We actually did a feasibility study for an eco-industrial park, which is a collection of businesses that use recycled materials as raw materials. So it's actually dealing with solid waste that we have in our community. Next up. Because it's already here, and we're taking it and we're adding value to it. On this particular site, we're actually taking trucks off the road because it actually has, the site has barge and rail transportation as well. And we're producing products that we can actually use. And then more importantly, it's actually creating huge amounts of jobs as well. Again, mitigating solid waste, producing jobs that cannot be outsourced. And in a country, excuse me, in a city like mine, one of the richest in the world, we are the poorest congressional district in the country. And my city, you know, I'm really sorry to say this, but they have decided that on the same site where we wanted to see that eco-industrial park, they thought that it would be much better use to actually have a jail there. A 2,000-bed jail there. And, you know, they're also working on their sustainability plan, or a much ballyhooed plan about, you know, we're going to be the greenest city in the world and all that. And then, but I'm not so sure if they were actually thinking that those 2,000, maybe they were thinking those 2,000-bed jails could actually be part of their affordable housing strategy. Never know. Which is why I got to tell you, I'm really, really excited to be working with the brother I always wished I had, Van Jones, on... You have and you'll always be my hero. But Green for All is that kind of strategy that I know is going to become a movement to use the green economy to move people out of poverty. From the top level, Van was really involved in working on creating a green jobs bill, $125 million to build the kind of capacity to do green jobs training from the federal level on down. And with groups like mine and others that are happening around the country who are understanding that this is the way to go. This is a way to build the capacity for the people in our community, because we're not interested in throwing the lives away of anyone in our towns anymore. We are interested in them only being a part of the future as we know how beautiful it can be. I know what kind of America we can have if we decided that all of our people, regardless of their color and regardless of their economic status, that if each and every one of them was considered as powerful and as important as the next person. And that, I believe, the green economy can be that great equalizer, because everybody's got to breathe. And everybody needs to love, and we need to figure out how we can connect those two in ways that benefit everybody. Thank you very much. Oh, stop. Okay, thank you so much for that. That was nice. But now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Joe Rogers. Actually, before I do that, I just have to, just because I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but I doubt, when, the other side has little events like this, that they probably don't have 3 MacArthur Fellows all on the side of doing forces for good, not evil. Like Joel, me, and Lucy Blake. So there you go. I'm just we are that smart. And cute. So anyway, I'm introducing Joe Rogers, who is a professor of law, political science, and sociology at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And he directs the coolest national think and do tank on high road development and the new Center for State Innovation, CSI, and also COWS as well. COWS is a really unfortunate acronym for a very cool thing, but sorry about that. I can't help you there. But what he does is just incredible, and I hope to be working, following in this man's footsteps for much, much longer to come. And thank you so much for being here, and get your butt up here, baby.
Well, I know we want to get into some sort of discussion among ourselves. I'll try to be quick and sort of bring you all down a little bit. I certainly agree with Phil and Majora and everybody else that there is this unbelievable opportunity before us with the green revolution, the green job revolution, greening the economy, et cetera. It's a great opportunity in climate, obviously, in our national security, in our wealth, and I would hope in our equity, repairing some of the tremendous run-up in inequality that the U.S. has experienced over the last 30 years or so. I just want to make a few remarks about how to realize that opportunity and some of its dimensions. On the dimensions, what attracts me about the opportunity is not just its size, which is difficult to overstate, but the fact that given its extent, it really extends our politics from just a redistributive politics into the organization of the economy itself. It really is concerned with production. And it's also attractive because its size is so big that we can redo a lot of how we currently run our labor markets and distribute opportunity to people. That's the equity stuff that we'll get back to. It's also attractive, frankly, because it's climate, the thing that it's responding to, not just the profit motive, but also responding to the climate change, is something which is irreducibly international. And I think it would be good for all of us to actually have a politics which is informed from the start by an international perspective. You can do everything in the U.S. to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, and it won't make much of a dent, actually, in worldwide climate change. It's only 22% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the world. And so we're going to have to be both international in our politics and, I think, more attentive to the equity concerns in our politics than in some ways we've been. On the policy that's needed to enable realizing the promise of the green economy, I don't find it that puzzling. I think it's sort of straightforward. Let me just say what I think 6 basic things you need to do at the federal level are, and then what the same 6 things are that you can do at the state level. Indeed, in some cases, you can actually do a lot of those even at the city level. So I don't think the politics itself is difficult to name. One thing we got to do is we got to put some sort of level and then start lowering it, a determinate level, and no off ramps and lowered level over time on carbon emissions. I don't want to get into the disputes about whether it should be auction cap and trade or some other sort of cap and trade. I sort of think of carbon at this point, would invite you all to think of carbon not just as this another commodity that we'll be willing to let people bribe us to spend, but think of it more like a neurological poison, like mercury. And in the same way that you wouldn't say, okay, if you give us some money, we'll let you expend more mercury into the atmosphere. I wouldn't get too excited about the money aspect of the carbon emissions. You should just set a cap and lower it, and that should be known in advance. You should do the same thing for efficiency, sort of the reverse, again with trading, set a minimum floor on efficiency and then raise it. And we could get efficiency trading markets in the same way we get carbon trading markets, and that should apply to our appliances and transportation, machinery, and other sorts of things. We should actually do something serious about transportation. The horribly known safety loo, our major highway bill, is up for reauthorization in a couple of years. We should reauthorize it, but you should drive the money to the MPOs, and you should repair something which is essentially disruptive of environmental improvement in safety loo. Namely, you should make vehicle miles traveled the means of getting the money, which is sort of counter to the idea of reducing sprawl. You should push the money down into the MPOs, the metropolitan planning organizations, and you should put incentives in there to reduce carbon emissions, as well as the vehicular congestion stuff, reduce vehicle miles traveled, etc. So a basic transportation thing. We should obviously improve our grid. I don't know if we should make it a smart grid, a learning grid. We should make it a little bit closer to that, though. We're just talking wires here, after all. But we should make the wires connect better. We should make the wires a little bit more efficient. We should be able to repair the wires on a regular basis. And we should enable the grid to allow people to have higher end-use efficiency and to connect the different parts and to enable distributed energy generation and connect the different parts of the system. We should make a major move on renewables. We can have a national RPS, a national RFS. We can have feed-in tariffs of different sorts. We should actually, though, try to grow the industry, not just a series of renewable projects, which is where we're at now. We don't have any real industrial policy in the U.S. to grow the renewables industry, and we don't really have an industrial policy in the U.S. to revamp and upgrade U.S. manufacturing. But there are various suggestions out there and ways to do those things, and that would be an important part of realizing the promise. And then finally, we should make a big investment in technology. I think the technology will inevitably drive a lot of this stuff. You want to lower the costs of doing all of these things. We spend much less on renewable technology, as Phil was pointing out, than we did on the Apollo program, certainly, but we spend less than we did in 1973. It's sort of ridiculous. We should be spending a large amount of money on that. And we should not just spend money on the federal labs, but also on the commercialization processes and upgrade those in the way that other countries do. If you do those 6 things, I think you will be well on your way to actually greening the American economy. And you will grow the wealth, and GE and Cisco and the other people who are announcing great plans should be relatively happy with that. And any environmentalist who's not concerned about the distribution of that wealth should be relatively happy too, because I think we can make a significant dent in at least our contribution to global warming. But I don't think we should be particularly happy with that. Oh, I'm sorry. And then at the state level, you can do all the same things, basically, as states have already begun to do. States have already begun to do the carbon trading. States have already begun to do not the efficiency trading stuff, but certainly the appliance standards and the car standards that are higher than the federal level. They've started to do stuff and changing the way that they allocate the transportation money. They started to change a little bit how they're handling the distributed generation. They're certainly promoting renewables in different ways, and they're certainly trying to huddle their little bits of money together to get advanced technology funds. The deal in American politics I'd recommend to all of us as sort of a new mantra on federalism is we should all be for progressive federalism, which means that any state policy, we should sort of set federal floors but not ceilings on state innovation, and any state policies which go above that floor, in this case reducing GHG emissions, should be encouraged and not preempted by the federal policy. So again, I don't see a major problem in the political architecture of all this. But in terms of realizing the equity aspects of it, I think that's going to be a much harder lift. I think we do, in fact, need a movement out there which is pushing for that all the time and very vigorously and very loudly. We heard today, this morning, from the Reverend Jackson and Roger Wilkins and other saints of the civil rights movement how important it was to have a third rail, third force out there pushing. I think it's going to be particularly important, and I don't think we're there yet in terms of the infrastructure for that movement. Consider the scale of what we're talking about. This is partly an echo to what Phil was just saying, but maybe here's a way to think about it. A lot of you say that, well, let's have an 80% reduction in carbon emissions below 1990 levels by 2050, right? That's a common sort of demand. I hope you all realize that you could eliminate every power plant in America today, and you could stop every car in America. Take out the entire power generation sector, take out all of the transportation sector, and you still wouldn't be anywhere near 80% below 1990 levels. You'd be closer to 60%. You'd be at around 68%. And that's bringing the economy to a complete halt, basically. That's sort of a challenge. And then on our side, so it's important to, appreciate the dimensions of the challenge. And then on our side, we celebrate our small successes, and I do think there's a big success here. We're basically responsible. Years of environmental work, years of coalition building with the labor movement and community groups to actually get these 4 different groups. This is what Apollo's one contribution is. I think it's an important contribution to get progressive business, labor, environmentalists, essentially white-dominated labor, and heavily communities of color, heavily urban-based, to see that they have a common interest in a project. And it's great. It's great, and that success should be celebrated. In fact, the science is at our side, and that it's now becoming mainstream politics is great. You know that you're winning when the opportunists climb on board, and we're now winning, and we're now mainstream. But we should really move with the authority of being in the mainstream and actually begin to use that power. And to use that power, I think we've got to get ourselves a little bit better organized. So, just to use as an example, Van and Majora tonight rightly are going to get big awards as leaders of this movement, but as Van will tell you, as Majora will tell you, the number of actual jobs that they've been able to move people into is very small. I think Van's operation is still about 60, 80 people, something like that. Majora over 4 years has moved about 100 people or 85 people. This is 150 million working, there are 150 million people in the American labor force. You add that and that, or people are excited about the stuff we're doing in Milwaukee, where we hope, although it hasn't even begun yet, we'll have 7,000 person years of employment. But we're just at the beginning stage, basically, of beginning to actually realize this opportunity. So then finally, where could you begin? And the infrastructure we need is the sort of infrastructure you always need for an effective movement. We need better communication. We need mechanisms of recruiting young people. We need a bunch of different service centers, technical assistance, and other things. We need a clear message in all these different sectors of possible improvement about how this would benefit a bunch of people who otherwise would resist the thing. We need models, we need money, blah, blah, blah. We can build that infrastructure. All I'm saying is that's work still ahead of us. And unless we build that infrastructure, we're not going to be able to tap into the enormous energy that could be organized for a mass movement demanding the equity aspects of this, as well as the wealth and the climate aspects of it. The place to begin that, I think, is the place where that movement is most naturally based, where our base is, and that is probably in our metropolitan areas. That's most of the population, a larger share of the economy. If we could take ourselves at the source of most global warming, the places of highest union density, highest density of color populations, greatest wealth, for all sorts of reasons, I recommend it. And the place to begin that, using cities as the target, the place to begin that, I think, is with the building efficiency stuff. That's the thing which is fairly labor intensive, will in fact immediately generate the greatest number of jobs, does pay for itself in a pay-go environment that we're going to be in, and it's only going to get worse given the events of the last several days. And that, I think, would be the first starting point. But even for that, we need better infrastructure than we have. Anyway, that's something on the frame and moving it forward.
That was very good, Joel. That was great. Well, terrific. We got a few minutes for a little dialogue. Let me ask my colleagues a couple of things. I mean, 2009 is obviously a year of phenomenal opportunity. I mean, if you think about it, what a tragedy the last 8 years has been. It's been amazing how this White House has ignored global warming. On the other hand, we should be grateful because look at what happens when they pay attention to an issue. But having said that, 2009 is this extraordinary opportunity, and as I heard all three of us speak, you know, I spoke in a sense about the large agenda. Majora talked about what she's doing at the community organizing level. I think you framed in a sense, the politics of what needs to be done very well. But I want to ask this of you guys. 2009 is an enormous opportunity, but the clock is running, and we have the enormity of this issue is before us. What kind of political movement do we need to make the big strokes possible in 2009, 2010? Because you're right, we're still at a fairly nascent stage here, Joel. But I think about for a minute this issue of equity. For the last 30, 40 years, the notion of equity in economic growth has been missing from the dialogue of this country. It's been absent, even among the Democratic Party. How do we put that on the agenda? You talked about transportation bill. In this country, projections are that vehicle miles traveled are going to climb by 59% by 2030, meaning vehicle carbon emissions are going to be up by 40%, even with the passage of the new CAFE standards, the vehicle fuel efficiency standards. So, you know, how do you build a movement powerful enough to affect transportation policy on an immediate basis? How do you take the work that Van and Majora are doing and scale it up from hundreds of jobs, literally to millions of jobs, particularly in a context of a dissolving economy? All of which is saying is, how do we get the politics of this big enough, fast enough, so we can take advantage of what may be an extraordinary change of power and an opportunity like 1933 to do big things? We got to go big and we got to go quick. Either one of you, how do we take advantage of this moment?
Are these things on? Is this on?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question, Phil.
If I had the answer, I wouldn't have asked it.
I know. That's why they pay you the big bucks, right?
And by the way, if you can tell me how I could have beaten Schwarzenegger, you can add that in.
What?
No, just...
Yeah, right. Well, okay, here's some things we shouldn't do. I don't think we should hold up any investments that we want for success in getting a auction cap trade auction bill on carbon trading through. I think that's going to be complicated, and I don't want to hold it up for that. I think we should invest. We should insist that the next stimulus agenda, if there's going to be another stimulus agenda, but we should be directed toward the sorts of infrastructure investments we're talking about, heavily metro directed, where I think most of the market is, and we should not be willing to have this, sort of pissant, Democratic endorsed program of stimulus that's been offered so far. We want big public investments, and what will happen.
Joel, could you comment afterwards how you feel about the stimulus package?
Right. Okay. What I fear will happen, especially after the events of the last couple of days, is that we'll have some sort of pathetic rerun of 1993 or end of 1992, in which people who haven't said that much about investing in America in a serious way during this campaign will be brought back by saying, oh, no, you can't do that. The bond market, won't permit that. Or magically, we've run out of money. The Federal Reserve is in the process of nationalizing the banking industry, and we need all of your cash and savings in order to do that. And I think that the task for the left is to say, not this time. No, we insist. We don't care if you have to hang up the bankers and by their ankles and shake the money out of them, or repeal the Bush tax cuts, do more than repeal the Bush tax cuts, or get something back in America called progressive taxation. We insist on a certain amount, basically $800 or so billion in investment right here in stuff that's going to green the economy and grow jobs. That would be a first thing I would do. I would not go along with anything short than that. Then, how to get up to scale? The problem is going to be, if you really want a movement for this, which is as smart and beautiful and multicolored and ambitious as the best of America, then you've got to do a deal with the building trades and the unions in the cities. You've got to do a deal with the mayors, and you've got to do a deal with the community groups in which you set up a big trade in which the community groups say, labor, we are going to endorse your standards, but you've got to have different rules on letting us into the clean economy we're going to help you build. And labor's got to, agree to that. And it's politics for jobs, and that's got to be made very explicit, I think, in all of our major metropolitan areas. That's the discussion that I wish was a little bit further along today than it is, but that's the discussion I think is needed to happen. And with the finance community, you know that as well as I, but I think that it is quite possible to get access to private capital for a lot of this stuff. I think we can beat the finance rap on this. I think we can survive in a pay-as-you-go thing. But I do think we need the very basic politics of access to the jobs straight. And then finally, and I'm going on too long, I think you've got to get the people prepared. Vanowy says, well, where will Pookie get a job in this, right? What about a guy who's a former gangbanger, he's done a little bit of time, or he's under adult supervision, his reading level is only at the 5th grade level, he can't even pass the laborer's apprenticeship test. You've got to be sure, and this is part of the deal with labor too, you can't overnight make up for 30 years of divestment, of 400 years of racism, 30 years of incredible explosion in incarceration in our major cities, but we have to begin to do that now and hang a big lantern on the fact that that's part of the goal as well. So there's a whole healing thing with labor that is needed.
Good. Majora?
It really is all about just how do we make the climate right for the kind of investment that we want to see happening, whether it's public or private. And I agree, there's got to be a huge amount coming from the federal level to make sure this happens. Because I see this sort of as sort of a Marshall Plan. I mean, we didn't go and rebuild Europe because we liked them. We did it because it was economically advantageous to us after World War II. And if we're not in the mindset that we need people in this country to be as open, and supportive of a shared agenda, then I don't know what it is that we think we're going for right now. But definitely, we do, 400 years of slavery, all sorts of other crap that we've had to deal with as a country. But the bottom line is, we have a whole segment of society that is really unprepared, and acknowledging that, and giving us the tools, as communities to actually deal with that so that we can help folks, go and aspire to the middle class, which is what folks need to do, but we've got to get them to that point, and recognizing that you can't tell Pookie just because he's got there are jobs, just he may not be ready for them, and we've got to acknowledge that there's work that needs to be done, and that work is also going to require money, and lots of it, life skills, job readiness, in addition to the hard skills of whether it's the horticultural infrastructure or whether it's the building retrofits, and of course the real kind of relationship building that's got to go on between unions and communities in particular. These are the kind of things that's where we've got to start. That's just basic.
Yeah, Joel?
Yeah. Just quick.
By the way, that was a really big bug on your nameplate.
What? Yeah, it was enormous, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was enormous.
It's enormous.
Yeah.
I'm captivated.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's in your glasses case.
It's a very high source of protein, too. It's in my glasses. Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute. It's Karl Rove.
Yeah.
No.
You all see this bug? You see the bug? It's beautiful, yeah.
All right.
The nice guy, okay. Just on what Majora was saying, here's the good news. We know how to do that, okay? We may not know how to, let's see, what do we know how to do? We do know how to fix a bombed-out urban school. We know that is going to cost some money. We do know how to build career ladders for people. We know what to do through the PK through 20 system. You know this from your experience in California. And I think we've actually made progress here. We want this seamless, integrated, regularly tested and credentialed, modularized at the end, a little bit demand-driven system with lots and lots of up-ramps. And we know how to build those systems. We just haven't spent any money on doing it. And that really is just a question of putting money. In the transportation stuff, it's partly putting the money into things that we're not doing now and just moving the money around. On the rehab stuff, I think that's money which we can pay for. But here's the thing. Here's an advantage we have. Paul Romer said, a great economic crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And one thing, certainly one thing that's happened in the last 5 days is that we should have defeated the argument that unregulated private capital markets are the best way to keep track of our cash.
So, Majora, let me ask this question in 1 minute. 1 minute. Let's bring the comedian back up. No, I'm just going to ask you a 1 minute question. What do you envision, just in your mind's eye, take New York City, what do you envision in 10 and 15 years in terms of the nature of activities you're undertaking, how do you see them spreading and in what form and with what support? Is it a set of small community-based organizations? Is it woven into the fabric of public policy where, you know, throughout the whole economy you have both regulatory and investment incentives? How do you see it? Is it 1,000 flowers blooming? Majora will be back to you later this evening when she receives her award to give this answer. No, go ahead.
It's the 17-year-old kid who lives 2 doors down from me, who I am afraid for every single day that he's going to get shot because he thinks that there's nothing more for him than going and selling bags of weed, who suddenly realizes that his life is worth living, that he goes through a great job training program, that he ends up in an apprenticeship program, that he is pulling down more money than he ever thought he could by selling drugs, and that he actually has a family and love in his life and in his heart and his community, and people are looking at him like there is a future for me. That's what I see.
Good deal. Hey, thank you all very, very much. We'll see you tonight. Have a great day. Thank you. Good. Thank you. That was good.
Thank you, whole panel. As you're going out, please look for this publication, Making Sense, a progressive guide to kitchen table issues, including green jobs, right outside the door. And please visit the whole display area for all of our organizations. Thank you.